Hello, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, number 449, recorded live Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, and perhaps one of the lost episodes, the forgotten episodes. We'll see. I'm a little behind on the production, but we'll see if we don't get this one out or not.
Well, you've got all those people running around doing the Iowa caucus. They lost a bunch of stuff, so maybe these episodes, maybe they'll find these when they find the hanging chads. I don't know.
Well, and maybe I should get those folks that wrote the software that has been get them on this this production stuff. Maybe they're all going to have some free time on their hands pretty quick.
Yeah, it's been a little hectic there in Iowa, so I'm glad you guys. I think you survived, though, right?
Yeah, and I don't know how much time we want to spend on this. There's obviously been a lot of discussion about it. I wanted to clear up a couple of things that were out there. So one of the things is they were the results have been delayed because of a reporting software issue from a company called Shadow, and the news has said that Iowa paid $60,000 for this software, and everybody's like, I can't believe you're running a caucus on $60,000 software, blah blah blah. They licensed the software for $60,000. Other states also use this same software. Iowa did not have this software written for us. It was a company that sells this software. They licensed it for $60,000. And if you go out and look, the state of Nevada was also going to use it. They are not going to now. There's an article on Business Insider about it. It is not an Iowa thing. It wasn't three guys in their basement, in Coralville writing this stuff. The other thing that has come up is why this is so confusing, especially for people who in Iowa who are Republicans. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party in Iowa caucus differently. It's a completely different experience. And the Republican process is a strict vote. They send out a ballot, you check the box next to the person you want, they count them up, everybody goes home. The Democratic process is a lot different, and that is helping to contribute to part of these things because they've been changing the rules on that a little bit, so there's some confusion. So the caucuses started at 7 p.m. I was out by 8:30, home by like 9. There was one of my buddies on another side of town. That was with 490 people, so not a small group. Another buddy of mine in town here was at a similar size caucus. He didn't get out till 11:30 that night because they kept having recounts and all of that. So there was a lot going on. The third thing that I want to say is for the Democratic side, the process is 100% transparent. So people are all like, oh, this software company was, created by the Clintons and Pete Buttigieg invested in it and it's all shenanigans. I don't know about any of that. But for the Democratic side, the entire process is completely transparent. So I can see in the room who is supporting Bernie. And if the people who are reporting the results say there's only 10 people supporting Bernie, and I look over on that side of the room and there's 150 people there, it is immediately obvious that that is not correct. And all of it was up on a screen and people were taking pictures of it with their phones. So when the final results were done, everybody in the room could see them. So if on the reporting site, it comes back that our precinct went for Hillary or something like that, there's 400 people with proof that that wasn't the case. So the Democratic side, very transparent. I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. So a lot of fun stuff.
For the record, way more than I care. I just want to make a topical joke about you guys' ability to use software.
Yeah, so I was on a call yesterday morning at 9 o'clock my time, and the first word out of the first was like, what is going on in Iowa? I'm like, yeah, everything's on fire. Cars are getting flipped over. It's just anarchy and mayhem. There's, yeah.
No, yeah, and and really, it's right there was, I think we know, it's well known, right, that I basically stay out of these arguments on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah,
I can't.
You can't.
And somebody was, back to the whole $60,000 to write the software, back to that misinformation that was out there and they were talking about. And I was thinking, I could absolutely do that in Power Apps for $60,000 though. So, it was right. But once again, I was like, nope, just going to avoid.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it sounds easy on the surface, but when you start thinking about all of the different things, but yes, I agree that it could be done.
It was just fun, right? It's like, I kind of want to know how the software works so I can mock it, right? I would just build it just to amuse myself.
But yeah, it's been fun. And every 4 years, I'm reminded how odd the caucus process is in Iowa and how many questions people outside of Iowa have on it. So I try to be that person that they can ask questions to because it's a pretty weird process.
Yeah, the fact you guys just shuffle about in a big room until you figure out who you guys like the most is pretty bizarre in this day and time, but...
It is, absolutely. Here's what I will tell you about it. I really like the fact that it's completely transparent. Like, again, there is no way for any shenanigans to happen because of that, because you can see the entire room. And so there's just no way. The other thing is you end up having to have all these conversations, because when groups aren't viable, then other people come over and talk to them, and you end up having these conversations, and it's, I don't know. It's an interesting. I've caucused for both Republican and Democrat here in Iowa, and I prefer the Democratic process. It has its shortcomings, obviously, clearly, as we've seen, but I like it.
No, I mean, it is. And it reminds me of, olden times, right? I think you guys should all wear period costumes. And
well, that's exactly where it comes from. I mean, and to be honest, so this has highlighted some of the problems with the caucus process, the way this works out. Here's the thing, though. Iowa will never get rid of the caucus process. No matter how arcane it is, no matter how error-prone it is, Iowa will never get rid of it, because it is always first in the nation. And if we switch to a primary from a caucus, both parties have agreed that New Hampshire gets the first primary. So if we switch to a primary, we lose our first in the nation status, and billions, and I don't exaggerate, billions of dollars of revenue leave Iowa immediately. So they will never switch.
And can we just go ahead and say how ridiculous I think it is that you guys have to be first? I mean, I understand from you wanting, but the whole shenanigans of, and we've all decided New Hampshire gets the first primary, right? It sets the tone of the entire corrupt political election process. All these shenanigans that go into how you guys get to be first versus they get to be first, but you guys are doing different things, so it's okay. And I understand the revenue. I understand why you guys want to stay first.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it not less corrupt in the grand scheme of things.
So so somebody's got to be first. Well, I guess that's not true. You could have 10 states go on the same day. Why do you think Iowa should not be first?
Oh, no, I do not care that Iowa's first. I'm all for you guys getting your money.
It's the process that gets us there that offends you.
Yeah, it's the back channel, right? It's just the corruption that makes this a conversation that someone has to be first, right? I mean, why can't we just all have primary day on the first Tuesday of the year, all 50 states at once, and right? But you guys have finagled the system to be first. God help you, right? And to your point, you make billions of dollars, or you not make, but bring in billions of dollars of additional activity and revenue into your state for it. So God bless you. If you can do it, you can do it. But it doesn't make it overall help get rid of the corrupt politics narrative.
Yeah. I will say a lot of people have similar legitimate complaints. One of the complaints that is leveled a lot about it is that Iowa is a incredibly undiverse state, and it's hysterical that such a predominantly white rural state gets to set the tone for the entire primary season. That is legitimate, but here's what I will tell you: in the past, 3 elections, Iowans have voted for whatever Hillary, Obama, Ted Cruz. So why we might all be straight white males here in Iowa, that has not impacted who we have supported coming out. So it's not like it's always the old white guy coming out of Iowa. Our diversity, yes, that is not very diverse, but the candidates that we support absolutely have matched the diversity of the rest of the country. So it's not like we're giving the white guys a leg up by starting here.
Sorry, I thought you were going to switch to talking about the halftime show with where you were headed with that conversation.
That's a completely different deal. So yeah, I think Iowa's as good of any barometer for that.
And I have no idea who you guys picked or chose, or I didn't.
We don't either.
Oh, it still hasn't come out. So I don't know, from a place of ignorance, it still isn't out. Is that?
No. So they, I think yesterday. So normally, traditionally, it's out that night. Before everybody goes to bed on Monday night, everybody knows. Yesterday afternoon, the Republicans, obviously Trump got it because he's an incumbent. A couple challengers, but he's the incumbent. As of yesterday afternoon, 62% of the precincts had been validated and all that. And I think as of today, they're up to like 71%. So some, but not all. So we're just a little over 2/3 now.
And at 2/3, who is Iowa looking to support?
Mayor Pete has the lead right now.
I don't even know which one that is.
Pete Buttigieg, the former South Bend mayor?
I got nothing. Fair enough.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. But that's so, and I guess, the real losers out of this are the politicians themselves, because they, again, spent billions of dollars in Iowa. One of them expecting Monday night to have a huge bump heading into New Hampshire, and they all left with nothing. So they had to go to New Hampshire. There was a private plane that was chartered at the Des Moines airport and was taking reporters and campaign folks and candidates and all that directly to New Hampshire, because there's really not a lot of direct flights from Des Moines to New Hampshire. So this was a charter. They ended up delaying that till like 1:45 that morning, but everybody was waiting because somebody wanted to be able to say, hey, we won Iowa, but none of them got to do it. So they spent all this money and all this time in Iowa, and nobody got the bump. That's going to hurt us in 4 years. I'm not going to lie. That's going to be a big deal.
No, interesting. Right. And just so we're all clear, right, the whole reason that I don't know who Mayor Pete is, right, is because the Democrats are a hot mess, and I just refuse to pay any attention to them until they stop being a hot mess. I don't want you guys to think like I've never read a newspaper and I don't understand what's going on in the world. I just refuse to listen to the Democrats until they get their crap together.
Yeah, and so I mean at the same time last year, so obviously there was no incumbents last election. So I mean at this point there was like 12 Republican candidates. So that was Cruz and Carson and Trump and all those. So it was that mess on the other side last year because there was all these people. But now there's an incumbent this year for one party. It's a lot to keep track of. Yeah. And
so I'll let you educate me, right? Well, this is a political podcast apparently today. What is Bloomberg? Is he what ticket is he on?
He is on the Democratic seat, which is interesting because Bloomberg famously ignored Iowa. Famously said, I don't care about Iowa. I care about Super Tuesday. I'm not going to put any feet on the ground in Iowa. And it's looking like that might have been an incredibly wise choice for him because nobody came out of Iowa as a winner. Kevin's asking if you make a caucusing power app. You've got, 2.5, 3 years to get that hammered out. They're going to be looking for a replacement.
Yeah, and Kevin, I'll be honest. If somebody would show me the app, walk me through it in 5 minutes, I would absolutely build it just to amuse myself. So, all right. Anyway, so another thing that's completely unrelated to technology.
Completely.
So I think you took a little weekend getaway.
Yeah, the wife and I took the opportunity to just kind of get out of town for a couple of days, relax, go have some fun. Yeah.
and what and was it just right? Just tell us how excited you are. I know as soon as I put the quarter in the slot here, the puppy's going to go. I'm going to go eat some lunch. I'll come back when you get done. But Todd, tell us about the experience of your Chiefs winning the Super Bowl and how it's the greatest moment of your life. Your kids won't hear the show, so they won't know that it wasn't them.
No. And not all my kids have to go to college, so it's not a big deal. So my wife's family grew up in Kansas City. They're all big Chiefs fans. We've been following them and all that. And the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl. And so last week, 2 weeks ago, maybe, I convinced my wife that her and I should go to the Super Bowl. So my wife and I went to the Super Bowl and got to watch the Chiefs win Super Bowl 54.
And that seems like a kind of a big deal. It was
the greatest time ever. So I brought some props here. So this is my bring it out here. Got my lanyard. You're no good without your lanyard. So got my ticket here. So I've gotten a lot of questions about how you get the tickets. You just buy them any other way you would buy tickets. So StubHub, Ticketmaster, the NFL has some because it's a Super Bowl thing. There is no scarcity of tickets. There's 65,000 tickets to this thing. Not everybody wants to go. If you ever want to go to a Super Bowl, just try to buy tickets the way you would buy tickets to anything. So.
And so I assume they just, shipped you a nice little package, right? Because you got, like you said, you got a lanyard and some other stuff. So you just had like a FedEx envelope you needed to sign for. And
yeah. So, there was that. So we got the ticket. We got our package came, and I think most of them do. We didn't do anything special for this. I would have not paid for this if that would have been an option. We got tickets to a pregame show. They sent us a NFL-approved clear bag that we could take, or two clear bags that we could take into the stadium. So that was cool. Yes, and that because of the cost of the tickets, FedEx would not drop them off, just tuck them in my door. They wouldn't do that. They also would not let us change any of the settings, so I couldn't just say, yeah, go ahead and drop it off. I had to go and sign for it in person no matter what. So I guess it might be the most expensive thing I've ever had FedEx to me, likely. So yeah, I got that here a few days ago.
So yeah, that was so you got there, right? You got to hang out. Was there any cool what was the coolest thing other than the game, right? So take away sitting in your seats and doing that. Was it the pregame party? Was it just the energy? Was it the confetti raining down? Taking away the game, what was the coolest piece of it?
The pregame party was kind of weak, and there were a bunch of pregame parties. I think there was 6 of them, so I don't know that they're all no good, but ours was not great. It was Chiefs only, and like Pitbull was at one of the parties. We were not at the party with Pitbull. That would have been kind of cool. Got a soft spot for Pitbull, kind of like that guy. So the party was, it was okay. Like I said, I wouldn't have paid for it if I wouldn't have had to. The energy, just the spectacle of it was great, though I think a big part of that was just me repeatedly pinching myself and saying, oh my God, I'm at the Super Bowl. I just could not, I'm still not complete. It still seems a little surreal, not completely real yet. So that was a big part of it. The halftime show was pretty crazy. We had really good seats, so we were in the front row by one of the corners. If you watch the game or go back and watch it again, the Fox Sports guys were broadcasting right in front of us, so all of that was going on. When they were getting the halftime show set up, a bunch of the kids that were out there and the people with the hoops and all that, they were all staging right in front of us so we could see all that. We had all the seats, they had wristbands that were taped to the seats with some instructions. So when you watch the halftime show, we all had those on our wrists and were instructed to hold those up, and that's how they controlled all that. Just the whole thing was just amazing. One of the cherries on top, and I can't pick my favorite part at all, but after the national anthem, 4 Marine jets flew overhead. I just happened to know one of the pilots. And so he and I had been in contact the day before. He wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like, nor was I. So somewhere towards the end of the third quarter, I guess it was in the fourth quarter, I got to go meet up with him. He's a few years younger than me. We grew up in the same town, 2,000 people. So I knew his family. I'd met him as a kid, but we got to take some pictures together and chat about people we knew. But knowing that he was one of the pilots that flew overhead was just pretty damn cool.
And so I was curious about this. I didn't get a chance to ask you earlier. Logistically, right? Because, yes, he was above the game. He's only 1,000 feet above the game, but he's going several hundred miles an hour. Mm-hmm. I assume that there's not a Marine jet parking at the airport. So does he goes back, he lands on base, and then he just gets in a car and just drives as fast as he can, police escort back to the game type of thing? Or
I did not ask him. That was one of the things I meant to ask him. I forgot to. But yeah, I assume that. Now, the thing is, he was going several hundred miles that way. But he can turn around and go several hundred miles back the same way, so he can land wherever he wants to. But yeah, I assume that's the case. There was a police escort sitting somewhere. The other thing is they just don't park those airplanes anywhere. I know when I was in the Army, I worked on helicopters. If they were parked outside of a military installation, they were heavily guarded. And President Clinton came to Iowa State when I was in there, and Marine One was stationed at our Army base in case he needed to be extracted quickly. We couldn't even go anywhere near that. I mean, so it's not like they're just going to any place they can take it. It's got to be a secured area. But yeah, I assume you had a police escort. So that's a funny thing too, was we were pulling into the stadium. We were in a shuttle from our hotel, and police escorts coming by. So we all have to pull over, and it was buses. So we're like, oh, it's probably some of the players. And we're watching the motorcycle cops. The motorcycle cops were wearing their regular motorcycle cop helmets, but they all had Chiefs emblems on them. So like, well, that's the Chiefs. So and there was buses for their families and all that. Jason in the chat room saying they probably put him in a helicopter and flew him over. Yeah, pretty good idea. But I don't know where they would have landed that either.
Well, I mean, so knowing, right, there's several Air Force bases down there, right? So I've got to believe that they went and did MacDill, right? So MacDill's over towards Tampa, but that's an hour. But if you hop in the helicopter to that point, then it's probably they could have flown. So that is the most interesting thing. Next time you talk to this dude, I want to understand the logistics of.
I will text Adam and ask him because I had that same question. But so when I finally met up with him, it was the middle-ish of the fourth quarter. And if you go back and look at the game, that's when the Chiefs were making their comeback. They were behind. And so I really wanted to chat with Adam, but I really wanted to watch the game from down in my seats. But I will text him and ask that if that's because I had the same question. I will find that out.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of stuff. If you go out and look, you can find things how they, there's an interview with them on NFL.com about how they got chosen for that. It's a really fun story.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. And I'm glad the NFL spent some bucks, right? Because in the past, I always assumed that, it was just the military kind of did it, to promote their brand type of thing. But I understand it is the NFL or the stadium pays for those type of things, right? They pay some tax. Pay us tax dollars a couple bucks to have those guys fly over, and it's different prices based on whether they want, the stealth bomber flying over versus a big old C9 going bang.
Yep. So in Kansas City for one of the playoff games, we got F-18s from the Navy, and for one of them we got the B-2. So depending on what the budgets are, I suppose. Another interesting thing. So of course there was the whole Mahomes was named the Super Bowl MVP. I can't wait to go to this, Disney World, all that kind of stuff. Apparently, I was watching a podcast yesterday. Apparently, that is written into every Super Bowl player's contract that if they are named the Super Bowl MVP, they have to say during their interview, I'm going to Disney World, and they have to go to Disney World. And so I hadn't really thought much about it because there's a whole lot of things. But the podcast I was talking about was like, okay, imagine you're Patrick Mahomes. You've had the 2 weeks that you've had. You had the game that you had. You had the night that you had, all the partying that goes after that. Now they're going to make you go to Disney World for a day. As tired as you are, as exhausted as you are, as hungover as you are, now you got to go to Disney World all day. And when you go to the place that's supposed to be entertaining you, you have to be on. You have to entertain them all day. Man, I mean, I get it, but geez, wow.
So Nicola and I had this exact conversation 2 nights ago, and
and
really, I think what it kind of boiled down to, though, is typically your Super Bowl MVP. Not always, right? But 9 times out of 10, it's the quarterback.
Yep.
And those guys, all right, they're professionals, right? They know that as long as they do the right things, they're going to make $100 million, retire at 35, and And so I would say that Patrick Mahomes probably did not party at all after the. I mean, he probably went to a party after the game. Yeah. He did not go do, lines of coke and, get high or right. I mean, he went, he shook a bunch of hands. He did his thing.
Yep.
And he went to Disney and he said, all right, this is just part of building my brand. And
it is. Yeah.
Right. But like if you set somebody like Odell Beckham Jr. as the MVP, Gronk. He might have a hard time at Disney the next day. Gronk. But yeah, your Brady's, Gronk would be a bad one, right? But your Brady's, your Mahomes, your Eli Mannings, or any of the Manning brothers, right? I think they all are like, it's just one more day in the work. They had no intention of going out and getting wasted after the game. So
yeah, and I don't think it was that. I just think that, and this guy's point, and I kind of see it, was after all of that, there was nothing Patrick Mahomes wanted more than just a good night's sleep. Like that is all the man wanted. He didn't want to go, snort coke off a hooker's butt or anything like that. The man just wanted to shake a few hands and get some sleep for the first time in a month. And they're like, nope, you got to go to Disney World. that was the guy. And I get it. And for Mahomes, without getting too NFL wonky on the people who don't care, this couldn't have happened at a better time for him. His rookie contract's up in a year. Those negotiations are starting. League MVP, Super Bowl MVP. Yep.
That $100 million contract's going to be no problem.
As I've told people, I suspect the negotiations will go something like this. Mahomes will have a napkin. He will write a number on it. He will slide it over to Clark Hunt. Clark Hunt will sign it, and then everybody will just walk off. I don't know if that's exactly how it goes, but yeah, I suspect very similar to that.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting, though, or has Mahomes learned from some of the people of the past, like Joe Flacco, right? Because Joe Flacco did that whole thing. He bet on himself. He got the Super Bowl MVP, and he got, at the time, the world's largest contract. Mm-hmm. And then his team was complete crap because they had no money left to pay any players, and they've sucked since until they moved to Lamar Jackson. So,
and by contrast, Tom Brady, who arguably could have demanded the largest salary ever and gotten it with a smile on their face, chose to go down a little bit so that didn't happen to him. And
so
6 Super Bowls.
So we'll find out, right? Does Mahomes tap him out? Does he find another way?
Yeah.
And I'm really kind of disappointed, and maybe they're doing a better job of it than I think, but I got to imagine if I was the owner, I'd be like, all right, look, if you'll play for, I don't know, making up a number, $15 million a year, right? I'm going to hire your wife for $10 million a year, right? Or, I'm not maybe that blatant, but I have to believe that they're pretty good at shenanigans. Like, that's how they get these kids through college, is these type of shenanigans. So why are they doing more of that at the NFL level? You know, hey Brady, if you do this, when you retire, you get a 1% ownership, right? You know how much money that's worth?
He might. And if you guys don't already, Shane and I are big fans of the Freakonomics podcast. They had an episode a year and a half ago about Jimmy Garoppolo, who was the quarterback for the 49ers, but they also cover a bunch of NFL things, and they replayed that one 2 weeks ago. It's an interesting one just to see how some of the sausage is made with the NFL.
Yeah, how to stop being a loser or something like that.
Right? Yep. So that's interesting. It was overall, it was just a tremendous experience. Again, I'm several days removed, and I still am not entirely sure that I believe that it happened. Still feels like it might have been a fever dream. It was pretty cool.
Well, congratulations. I was very jealous.
Yep.
And if you guys are really wondering, I was, right, because with Todd, when he knew this opportunity presented itself, right, he kind of had the two devils on his shoulder, and I was absolutely one of the devils over there saying, bye.
I don't remember if you said specifically that you'd never speak to me again if I didn't do it, but it was implied. I mean, it was, yeah.
Well, if you remember, I forwarded you the paperwork on how to take a second mortgage out on your house, right? I was trying to help.
Well, and some of those micro articles about how, plumbers are good people too. Not everybody needs to go to college. It's
just don't tell your kids.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy thing. And like I told Shane before the show, the true measure of something is, would you do it again? And knowing what I know now, I would absolutely do it again. It was pretty great.
All right, well, with our last 5 minutes today, should we run through some technology stuff or?
Yeah, you had a couple of things you wanted to talk about. I had a couple of things, but I'll let you. I've monopolized the entire first bit, so go ahead and pick some stuff.
Well, and since Jason's in the chat room, right, fellow presenter, I thought it was really interesting. I found an article about PowerPoint is adding a new feature called PowerPoint Live Presentations. And so as a presenter, if I use the web experience to present from, which I would never have done on my own, but now I realize it's a new feature, you can put up a QR code at the beginning of the presentation. Audience can take a picture of it. It'll load up the URL. And so then they can go and watch your presentation on their device. And not only do they get that, they also get the transcript or the closed captioning. So it's going to broadcast. They can translate that into roughly 60 different languages on the fly. They can fill out responses, so you can build surveys and things into your presentation mid-part. You can do a how did you feel at the end form built in. They can move backwards and see content that maybe they missed because they were in the bathroom, like you missed your photo on the one site.
Yes.
So I don't know. I was reading about it. It's not out yet, so I haven't played with it. But reading it, I was like, this would be really cool as a guy who does a lot of presentations to be able to, go and do that.
Yeah, and so I did not see that when I saw a different PowerPoint thing, but as a presenter, I really like where they're going. So PowerPoint, I feel, has stagnated a little bit, or maybe it's just you and I have stagnated and haven't recognized all these things. But I definitely like this new interactivity that they're adding. Jason said he's used it. So I think, I've got some presentations coming up here later this year. I'm going to take some time to see how I can work some of this stuff in. It's going to require a little more planning than you and I commonly do on our PowerPoint decks. But I really like the idea.
Planning. I don't know what that word means. Like you're going to open the presentation before you give it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So since you don't have me to push you along anymore doing your presentations, you don't have to worry about that.
I honestly, I've gotten worse, if that makes you feel any better.
I assume I was the only thing holding your stuff together, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've done multiple 8-hour days without a deck. Like I just show up
and for Power Apps, that's probably a great way to do it. So, yeah.
And so completely random tangent from that, but one of the things that has been real interesting, I've been writing training and teaching training since 2004.
Yeah,
right?
15%.
Yeah, right. Lots of SharePoint stuff. I don't know, I've probably literally written a dozen different like full-length SharePoint courses. You know, obviously you and I wrote the books together, right? We've done a lot in this space.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, you know, when I taught SharePoint, right, when we wrote this content, right, and I keep saying I, but it was both of us, you know, one of the things we always kind of did was it'd be like, all right, here's a search module, and then here's a search lab, right? It was kind of like one-to-one, because in SharePoint, each topic they were kind of islands in a lot of ways, right? You know, search was one thing, PowerShell was one thing, manage metadata was another thing. They were kind of a bunch of islands. They interrelated, but overall they were individual topics.
Yeah.
And that's been the kind of technology training model for a long time. Well,
yeah, I was going to say that's what we piggybacked on what was already out there. So yeah, that was.
Oh yeah, right. That's the same way you teach pretty much any technology platform. And so when I set out to write that first Power Apps class, I kind of planned to do that, but Power Apps just doesn't work that way. So I've like completely rebooted the model. And so basically, because everything is interrelated to do it right, I kind of teach it as one big hot blob. Yeah. But when I write labs for the classes now, instead of writing a lab on galleries versus labs on form controls and those type of things, instead I write one big lab as well that just builds an app and kind of incorporates all those topics, but it does them in the flow of the app instead of like trying to say, here's a module just on this particular control. And so anyway, as I was pitching this to a customer a couple weeks ago, they were having a really hard time with it. It was really interesting to me, like how, you know, they were just like, no, you know, if you're going to teach us a class, it needs to be, you know, 32 hours of instruction over 5 days. It needs to be, and I'm like, I could do that, but that's not the right way to learn this platform.
Right.
You know, and it's just always funny, like how, you know, sometimes people are so adaptive to change and things, and other times they're like, well, no, I mean, I'm adaptive to change, but the way that I learn about change has to be in this structure. And I don't know. It was just, you just reminded me of that all of a sudden.
No, I think that's valid. I think it's pretty easy to get comfortable with things the way they are and not, you know, think about changing things up. I can definitely see, I do most of my training on PowerShell and SharePoint, and I don't think that it lends itself well to what you're doing. But I definitely see how Power Apps does. So like making an easy app that has galleries and forms and all that, and then a more complicated app that maybe adds some other stuff, and then, you know, because each of those pieces of Power Apps, you can go deeper and learn new tricks. And so that's kind of what you're doing. You're not teaching the technology, you're teaching the technique, the thought.
The application of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great approach. So what did you end up doing for that customer?
I don't know. I haven't heard back from them yet. I'm assuming we won't get the business, right? I'm mostly certain, but it was just kind of fun to have that conversation because they were the first ones like really challenged me on it. I'm like, yo, no, I realized how passionate I was about how the learning model was different with this one when I had to like not argue, but justify it to someone, and even at the expense of, you know, losing I don't know how much money it's worth, but a lot of money contract. I'm like, you can't, because of the application, you just can't teach it the same way. So I don't know. It was fun.
Yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. Yeah, I think you're right.
It was not something I planned on talking about, but you made me, when you were talking about my lack of preparation, it made me think about the one thing I actually had to do preparation for, right? Writing a class. Oh.
Yep. So circle back to the PowerPoint thing. You talked about the PowerPoint live presentations. Another thing that I saw in this last week, and I don't remember if it's in the notes. Yeah, it's not in the notes. I saw a blog post on how to insert forms and quizzes inside of your slide deck so that if you distribute your slide deck before the class can go in, find your form while you're doing it, fill it out, and then you can see the results live on your deck in front of the class that they filled in. So that's, you know, I keep seeing Microsoft Forms popping up. It's just getting bigger and bigger.
No, I completely, and because of the forms conversation you and I had a couple weeks ago, I actually did an introduction to Microsoft Forms video and put it out there on YouTube just to start driving this home, because it is interesting. Forms has been coming up a lot lately because, you know, as you would point out, right, everyone's been using SurveyMonkey for so long. It was just kind of like, yeah, that's how you do that stuff. And now that we're talking about forms and you realize it's a little more integrated, it's got a little more flexibility about getting the data out of there instead of just dumping it into Excel, it's been kind of interesting how the different ways we can embrace that possibly.
Yeah, and I think forums. I'm looking to see how many views you got on that thing. 3,000. So not bad. Not one of your bigger ones, but not bad. So when I see forums, I see two things. I see a SurveyMonkey replacement, and I see a Google Forms replacement. And I think Forms has the potential of kind of satisfying both of those needs. Those are both places where I have to use cloud services that I find myself wishing I could do it in the Microsoft ecosystem. So again, I could leverage the identities that I already have, collect the information in places I already own, things like that.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's and we're putting it in front of different solutions in ways that probably don't seem natural, but it's working out pretty well. And you commented on the views, so I can tell you it's one of my fastest to 1,000. Right?
Oh, awesome!
It's only got 3,000 views, but it's also only been out there for 2 weeks. So 2 weeks for 3,000 views is pretty good. And compared to some of my friends on YouTube, 3,000 is like a great lifetime number. So it's been a pretty popular topic with people. And the nice thing is my goal is then to be able to build on it, right? So now I can say, hey, if you don't know how to use forms, go look at that one. But now we can start to do the more complicated. And then honestly, what I really would want to do is I need to learn more about Microsoft Forms Pro, which is the paid version,
right? Which
adds a bunch of features, but they don't do a real good job of like making it easy to understand what features it gets. So
I saw your tweet the other day about that. Yeah. All right, so a couple minutes left. I've lost track of how long we've been going because we started late. I wanted to mention the Chromium-based Edge, since we've talked last, has been pushed out. It's general availability. Today I switched over, made it my default browser. I've been using it for a while. There were some sync issues and login issues. They've long been handled. So it's really great. So if you are using Chromium Edge, obviously, most of the audience for this podcast is going to be Office 365 users and all that. You can now set up profiles like you could in Chrome. I've done some blog posts on that. But these profiles can now sync with Microsoft accounts, Office 365 accounts, Azure AD accounts. And that has been really powerful for me because those are accounts I'm doing everything with. So it's awesome that those all sync up. The other thing that has happened is one of the differentiators between Chromium Edge and Chrome is the ability to pin a page as an app. And loving that because of one word, Teams. So one of my many complaints about Teams is you can't have multiple instances of Teams up. So if I'm talking to two different people at a time, I have to switch back and forth, and that takes a long time. Or if I'm watching something like this thing with Shane, and somebody sends me a text, then I have to go change the chat thing, and it's all ugly. But with Chromium Edge, if I browse to Teams in the web, I have an option to go pin this page as an app, and it turns it into a web app. And honestly, it's not 100% parity, but as I'm so I always have the full Teams client and then a Teams app open, and I end up moving them back and forth depending on what I'm working with. I get them mixed up. I forget which one I'm working on. Now, there's some color differences and all that, but the functionality isn't so horrible that I'm like, oh, I got the app one, I need the whatever. So I plan on doing a blog post on that and just showing how to do that. But now, and it shows up in your taskbar as Teams, not as Edge. You can have multiple profiles. I'm really a big fan.
Well, I would love to see more of that content out of you because you've been my ChrEdge pusher, and so I've installed ChrEdge, and it just replaced Edge, right, which is my default browser, but I don't use. If that makes any sense.
Completely, yep.
And so I would like to do more with it. And like I read about the apps, and I heard that like the Outlook app is apparently amazing also.
Yep. I've heard that, yep.
And so, but I think, maybe you could use this as an opportunity, and I'm pitching you on ideas, is you should go and do like you never made the video around like how to do the Google people. You talked about it a little bit, but like I think you could go make some content around some of these things right now, and maybe, capture yourself 3,000 views in 2 weeks and, feel the power.
Yeah, so I've got all those so I've got a OneNote that has blog posts I'd like to write. I have both of those topics outlined and all that. So yeah, it's a possibility. So Jason sent me something in Slack and I can't open it. Jason, put a description in there so I can tell what it is because I can't get it to open in my browser. The ChrEdge things work pretty well, and so I think there's the profiles, the syncing, the apps. I think there's some real value for Microsoft-focused professionals.
I've also heard it's faster than Chrome for like things like Power Apps. I haven't tested that, but I've heard anecdotally that it is it's a little bit faster even. So
yeah, I've not noticed that. It has the same option that Chrome does where you can leave it going on in the background. I can tell you that with all the instances of ChrEdge I have open, it's soaking up lots of RAM, but I think that's because of decisions that I've made on how to use it, because I have multiple profiles open and apps and all that. But it's, yeah, it could be faster. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have 5 profiles open right now. I get the problem. I had 32 gigs of RAM, and I use all of it on any day with just browsers.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jason, yeah, the thing that you posted was something that Shane and I had. I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about it, but since somebody brought it up, right before Shane and I went live, Mary Jo Foley posted that Microsoft made some realignments, as they often do, and your friend of mine, Jeff Teeper, is taking over Teams, as well as he already had OneDrive and SharePoint, ODSP, as the cool kids call it, and Office. Now he owns Teams as well. And then the Windows client and the hardware teams are now being consolidated under Panos Panay. So he's for those of you who've watched any of the Surface releases and all that, he's the guy that does those. So fun things afoot. For those of you that go to conferences and things like that, Jeff Teeper, you know, the godfather of SharePoint, the guy arguably that brought SharePoint back from the dead, 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago now. Incredibly friendly guy. Just super nice to talk to. I'm always amazed that he knows who I am and that he always, is happy to hear from me and all that. So yeah, if you ever see him, he's a good guy.
Yeah, I think he retweeted something or liked something I did the other day. I was like, oh, Jeff, thanks.
Yeah.
So congrats, Jeff. We know he's a long-time listener as well. I'm pretty sure his ascent started when he started listening to our podcast. So Jeff, good to talk to you. Good job, man.
Yeah, and he literally is, we speak in hyperbole a lot, but in 2012, 2013, a lot of us SharePoint folks were sure that SharePoint was dead, that Office 365 was going to take it away, that the word SharePoint would never be uttered again, that Office 365 would have sites. Matter of fact, it said sites in the waffle. And Jeff Teeper took it back over, and we are where we are today because of his leadership. So good guy.
Very cool. Should we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, you need to get lunch. So I don't know what promotion stuff you've got going on. I'll be at the SharePoint conference in May. So you can go to SharePoint conference or SharePointNA.com. Sign up for that. If you do use the code Simpraxis, that is my company name, you get $50 off. You get hugs from any or all of the Simpraxis employees that you want them from. I'm doing a session on site designs. I'm doing a session on PowerShell, and then just generally being a nuisance throughout the week. And then my European tour is starting to warm up in June. I'm going to be at Techorama in Belgium. I'll be doing a session there on PowerShell and then one on page modernization. And I'm going to be in Stockholm again this year. And I don't think I've nailed down what I'm going to talk about with them. What do you got going on?
Oh, I'm going to do a local user group this Friday. I'm going to drive to Lexington, Kentucky, and do the Common Data Service. And then I'm doing Cambridge, England's user group remotely.
Oh my!
Right, because my passport has still not been renewed. Shh, don't tell anybody. Don't judge. So I'm going to do that here, I think, the following week. So by the time this last episode is posted, right, we're in the year 2020, folks. So just for perspective. So that's all I got.
That is all I have. Thanks everybody in the chat room for helping us with our audio problems. I'm going to stick around here for a little bit. Thanks to you, Shane, for squeezing me in. I know they got you working a lot over there. So that's it. And also, if you guys want to reach out to us on Twitter, I'm Todd Clint. He's Shane's Cows. We will answer tech questions, caucus questions, Super Bowl questions, dog questions, whatever. But thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
See ya.